Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of this series of Unlearning the Falsehoods. In this series, we pick some facts and things that were taught to us in school in the name of history and um, point towards the fact that it was indeed a blatant lie. All right. So, for this particular episode in the series of Unlearning the Falsehoods, we are going to see how exactly did the Christian colonizer, fragment the society, and how were they able to um, get their way around it and make us believe that indeed Christianity is the truth, and that is the way you're supposed to even look at your own faith through a Christian lens. All right. So to understand this, you must really keep in mind that there were conversions taking place on two fronts. Okay, the pagans of Bharat were being converted by two monotheistic traditions. One is Christianity, another one is Islam. Okay, both these monotheistic forces were hell bent on converting the pagans of Bharat to their fold of monotheistic traditions. Okay, for this video, broadly, we'll focus on Christianity, but we definitely are going to convert the efforts made by the Islamists to convert the pagans of Bharat to their version of monotheistic traditions. But more about it in the upcoming videos. The focus of this video is the Christian colonizer. Uh, when they came over here, all right, they came here with this idea of the scriptural origin of a faith. Okay, so this idea that your religion must have its origin in scriptures, because they themselves had the origin of their own monotheistic tradition in the scripture that we like to call it as Bible. Although they have different versions of Bible, such as Old Testament and New Testament and so on and so forth. But yes, this broad idea that uh, your belief system must have a scriptural origin for it to qualify as a religion, that was the broader idea of Christianity. Okay, now when they came over here, they realized that simply just coming here and boasting about the cultural superiority of Christianity over the pagans of Bharat was not doing it, because inherently and from the very inside, the pagans were convinced that although we are a subjugated although at that point in time, although the pagans were a subjugated race, but they were very much confident with their culture being superior to the colonizers. All right, so the colonizer realized that no, these people are not convinced by simply just telling them that, oh, our culture is superior to yours. All right, so what it did was, so here you need to understand the difference between the method of conversion by both the major monotheistic traditions. Islam was outrightly violent. They converted people, by the sword, obviously. But at least Christians had the decency to ask and offer something in return to convert us, I would say, because although they were definitely cunning, the cunning Christians, they were definitely yeah. So they were willing to offer things in return, but even after doing that, they realized that we need something very deep. We need to plant something very deep that even not this generation, but even the upcoming future generations will be brought up with Christian lens. All right, so yes, they adopted this method of subtly introducing changes into the things that we do on a daily basis, things that we need on a daily basis. All right, so what the Christians did was they picked uh, three of the most useful tools that were at their disposal during that time. One was the state machinery, meaning the government, meaning how things function. Another one was education, and the third one was centers of learning that we call as temples. All right. So about the state machinery, obviously in the previous video we have learned, or we have understood, and we have established that all the legislation and all the charters of the Westminster Parliament was sometimes subtly and more often not so subtly hinted towards the fact that indeed the aim of colonization was conversion and proselytization. So, charter after charter, law after law, act after act, they kept on adding these clauses that would benefit the missionaries to convert more and more people. All right. So, they took an approach to convert us using three layers. First layer was the state. By the state I mean the government. All right, so how did they do this? Was they introduced some of the laws, okay, and the laws were in English. The interpretation of the law was in English. English has an inherent Christian nature. Okay, when I say English I mean the English language. Okay, it has an inherent Christian nature in it. So the even to this day, our laws are written in English and interpreted in English with an inherent Christian or a monotheistic bias. All right. So yes. So what they did was they used state machineries. They introduced several laws of medium of instruction, not being vernacular. Initially, it was vernacular, but then towards the latter part of the colonial rule over us, they made it mandatory for schools to teach in the language of English, and hence the state machinery was providing a cushion or I would say, a backup or laying the groundwork for conversion, because there were certain rules, some questionable rules that were made. Uh, Now the next thing that the Christians did was regulate the education. All right, they believed that the indigenous knowledge was of no intrinsic value, had no scientific value whatsoever, and hence it made no sense. It made no sense for them to build up schools to disseminate information and knowledge about the indigenous indigenous language, indigenous culture. So whenever they made up schools, they made sure that the curriculum and the syllabus that was taught in these schools was based on colonial lines. Okay, so they were indeed training people to look at the world with a Eurocentric lens, with the colonial lens. And you would be surprised to know that these schools or educational institutions in this very year of 2024, they still continue with this approach. Okay, schools in this time, school in the current times in our country of Bharat, they are training students to look at the world with a Eurocentric lens. They are not training students to look at the world through a nationalistic lens. And when I say nationalistic, I do not subscribe to the framework of nationalism of the colonizer, because for them nationalism means to go to other countries, slaughter people, exploit their resources. That is not the understanding of nationalism when it comes to Bharat. So yes, even to this very day, such methods have not been abandoned by the school. We still continue with the colonial framework, colonial syllabus, and whatnot. But in essence, yes, it was sowing this seed or sowing this germ of looking at the worldview through a Eurocentric vision, and hence preparing the groundwork for easy conversion. Okay, next up is attack on the centers of learning and knowledge. Okay, temples from the ancient times have been the center of learning and knowledge. Okay, worship was a byproduct of learning. All right, so what they did was using the state machinery, what the British did was they established some sort of government control over the indigenous centers of knowledge production. All right, because they realized that the major impediment or the major hurdle towards the conversion of the masses was the priestly class, okay, that we like to call as Brahmins. They were the ones who were standing as a major hurdle towards conversion. And this is not just me saying it, you do not have to take my word for it. There are multiple white authors, not even authors from Bharat. There are multiple British authors who have said this and on record, that the major impediment towards the Christianization of Bharat was the priestly class. All right, so in order to develop a certain sense of contempt and a certain sense of certain sense of contempt and animosity between the priestly class and the masses, what they did was they passed certain laws, okay, passed certain laws to regulate the centers of learning, that is temples. All right, they made sure, okay, initially all the places of the place of worship, that is mosque, and the center of learning, that is temple, initially both these things were under the control of the Christian colonizer. But later on they realized that since the Muslims were the people of the book, hence they were slightly more acceptable to the Christians, who were also people of the book, rather than the pagan who was immoral and corrupt. So yes, they took over the centers of learning that we have, temples. They made certain laws so the state could control those temples, and those resources should not be used for the furtherment and the betterment of the indigenous knowledge systems and the indigenous languages and whatnot. Okay. To this very day, we continue with the same colonial mindset of controlling the centers of learning. Okay, initially it was designed to facilitate and lubricate this path towards conversion. Okay, so even after transfer of power in 1947, we are still continuing with these laws, and guess what, that is helping, aiding and abetting the majority monotheistic traditions in converting us, and it's still going on. Okay, to much of your surprise, it's still going on, the state control of places of learning and knowledge, that are temples. Okay, and so to end this in this video on this series, we will end with the legacy of the English language. Okay, there were major problems with translation. Most prominent one being difference between religion and dharma. Okay, this has been widely contested and debated, and finally, the Supreme Court has taken this stand. They have taken this stand. Okay, that dharma is different from religion. Religion is more a narrow term with a monotheistic bias. Okay, that a religion can qualify as a religion if it is uniformly applied all across the society and the entire society is homogeneous in nature, whereas dharma is more about practices and traditions that have come up from centuries of practice of a culture. All right, so yes, even to this day, the language of our constitution is English. The laws that are framed, the language of the parliament is also English. The language of Supreme Court and High Court is also in English. With that, okay, with that thing, we have managed to carry forward this colonial legacy of interpreting things in the English way. When I say English, I mean the English race. Okay, the language English has come out of this English race, and hence that language has inherent monotheistic bias. It has this uh, uh, inherent tendency to legitimize things that conform to the values of monotheistic traditions, but things that disagree with them have to be disparaged and belittled. All right, so yes, to this day, there are everything that we are surrounded by, be it constitution, be it government, be it Supreme Court, be it High Court, everything that functions on the language in English has an inherent bias. All right, everything surrounding us was designed to make it easy for the colonizer to Christianize and convert us. And much to the surprise, it still continues. Nobody has bothered to change it. Why? Because we seem to buying into this argument that we do not have any other viable alternative, which is clearly not true. That is something that we will cover in the upcoming videos in this series. But that's all for this video. Thank you for watching.